I was adopted 38 years ago in New Jersey, and I also have an adopted brother who's 2 years younger than I am. And his attitude about searching is real different from mine, and I don't know whether it's because he's a guy or this would be different anyway, but I seem to run into an awful lot of men that aren't as interested in searching as the women I know. I always wanted to know who my birth parents were when I was growing up. I asked a lot of questions, and no one could tell me anything. But I always wanted to know. But wanting to know and then doing something about finding out about what you want to know are two entirely different issues, I think, two different functions. And for a long time, I just figured that my birth parents knew where I was, and they would, someday magically show up somewhere, and we'd all, be reunited. When I was about 25, I went to a party, and I met this woman that introduced herself to me as a sister of this guy I'd known for many years. The guy was 6'4" with red hair. This woman was about 4'11" with dark skin and dark hair. And I said, "You can't be Jim's sister." She said, "Oh yeah, we don't look alike because we were adopted." I said, "Oh, I was adopted. He knew I was adopted. He never told me he was adopted," that kind of thing. And then she said to me, "Are you looking for your parents?" And I said, "No." And I felt really guilty. I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "No, you can do this, and there's, she belonged to Alma up in New York, and I was living in Virginia at the time. I was up in New York visiting. And also 13 years ago when I started doing this, there weren't as many people doing it, and there wasn't as much media as there is about it now. And so I pretty much started out just stabbing around in the dark. And when I started searching, I was very excited. I said, "Oh, I'm going to meet my parents, I want to know what they look like." That was my big thing. I wanted to know what they looked like. And it was very important for me to know if they thought about me. That would be one of the first things that I was going to ask, did you ever think about me? And anyway, my search did not go well. I couldn't find out anything, and it turned into years and years. And as all this went on, my questions and my needs and my desires to search really started changing. Also, I started meeting more and more people who were involved in doing the same thing. I met my first birth mother, and that was just really exciting for me. Because I always thought that, I was searching, and I was only going to meet my birth mother, and I was never allowed to meet anybody else's birth mother, because, of course, they wouldn't want anyone to know that they were a birth mother. And I went to a CUB meeting, and I was just completely blown away. Women telling, I just couldn't get enough of this. What was it like, when you were pregnant? I wanted to know every detail. It was probably really painful for these people to answer all my questions, but I had to hear it. What was it like when you were in the maternity home? And what was it like when you had to tell your parents you were pregnant? And what was it like when you had to sign the surrender and all this stuff? And I started really getting pretty obsessive about my search at that point. I said I had to hear someone tell me that story about my situation. And I became really active and started helping all kinds of people. And everyone always threw out, "Oh, the medical need to know, the medical need to know." And I was interested about that because I was sick of going to the doctor and saying, I can't tell you anything because I'm adopted, but that really wasn't, it made it sound legitimate, but it wasn't the main force, the driving force of why I was searching. I guess about 2 years ago, I had to sue the adoption agency in order to get information from them, which took about 5 years. And so 2 years ago, I found my birth mother. And I was not nervous at all, but I had looked for 10 years, and, I had helped so many people do this, and I thought it would be so easy, and I would pick up the phone, and she'd be so happy to hear from me. And she was not at all happy. I talked to her for maybe less than a minute. She told me never to call her back, and not to write her, and this whole bit. And I was devastated. And I wrote her a letter, and she didn't respond to that either. And the one thing, though, was when I was trying to understand why she wouldn't talk to me, I was really happy that I had heard her voice. I was real sorry I didn't tape it, since I thought maybe that would be the only 60 seconds I ever talked to this woman. I could have it on tape. But anyway, I was really angry, and I was really upset that she wouldn't meet me, but the idea that I knew where she was, I knew that she was alive, I knew that she was okay, and I knew what her voice sounded like, and I knew that she knew, even though that's just a tiny bit of information, that about me made me really happy. As it turned out, 10 months later, out of the blue, one morning, she called me up and said, "I'm ready to meet you." And I said, "Okay." And I was thrilled. And we have a good relationship now. I've known her for about a year. She will not talk about any of the stuff that happened at the time she was pregnant with me, or why, the surrender or anything like that, but she'll talk about anything that's going on now in my life, and she's really warm, and I think that it's only been a year, and I imagine that this will go on forever, and that she'll get more comfortable with it and become more and more open. Around the same time, I found my birth father, and I knew he lived in Chicago, and I knew I was coming here, and I just couldn't call him. I didn't want to I was real worried about the rejection, and I was also trying to work out this relationship with my birth mother, and I thought I just couldn't handle it, either way. So I put off calling him, and I ended up calling him last month, because I was coming here, and I had to call him. My friends were saying, "Aren't you going to call him? It's getting close." And so I finally called him, and he was totally overwhelmed. He was, I told him I had known where he was for a year, and he was sort of upset by that. He wanted to know why. Did you wait a year to call me? And he just couldn't wait to welcome me into the family. He told me he had 6 other kids, and had to meet them all, and I had to meet his brother and his wife, and he wanted me to meet his parents, who are in their 80s and live in Florida. And he told me he has a lot of anger towards them, because he told me that it was because of them that I was adopted. He wanted to marry my birth mother, and it was his parents that would not let them get married, and it was his parents that convinced him and also my birth mother's family to surrender me into adoption. So I think one of the reasons why he may want to tell his parents about this is to kind of put some closure to this 38-year-old issue that's been sort of bothering him for his whole life. One of the first things he asked me was, "How important was it for you to find me?" And I said that although my life didn't ever stop in the whole time that I was looking for you, it was basically the most important thing that I was going to have to deal with, and I was going to keep searching forever and ever. I would have never stopped. I mean, my search was so long that there were times when I wasn't actively doing anything, mostly because I couldn't or I didn't know what to do, but I never would have stopped searching. And one of the first things I noticed after finding both of them was I immediately, overnight, stopped looking at other people's faces. Saying, "I think I look like you," or, that kind of thing. I mean, it was something I'd done for 35 or 6 years, and it immediately stopped. I mean, I didn't even think about it. I just realized it. And also I can look at other people now and say, "Yes, you do look completely different than I do." Instead of looking at somebody and saying, "Maybe we're a little similar, maybe I'm," when really there is nothing about this person that looks like me. So that made me feel really good that I could stop doing that. And the other great thing that happened was to hear them, and also the other people that were involved in the reunion, like my birth mother's husband and my birth father's wife and his son and everything, look at me and say, "Oh, you look like so-and-so," or "Oh, you got the hair from," and this kind of thing. And the funny thing is they all disagree about who I look like, but it's really fun to sit around and hear people say all this, and then I think you immediately feel identified with these people. And it's you as yourself, the person who's searching, and there's all of a sudden come on all these people who are total strangers. It's a little bit difficult for you to look at them and exactly see who you think you look like right off the bat. It takes a long, and I think the only way that I've found that I can do is look at pictures, not look at myself and my father standing there together, but have two pictures in front of you of all the different family members and say, oh yes, this is who I look like. Or before I go on, does anybody have any questions about searching or what they expect to find out from their search or anything like that?
Why don't you tell them you met your birth father?
Oh. For those of you who don't know, I met my birth father at the O'Hare Airport on Tuesday when I flew in for this conference. He met my plane, and he only had an hour to spend with me before he had to go do something else. And the next morning he called me. Oh, he had to go out of town on Wednesday and Thursday, and he wasn't coming back till later on in the week. And he called me the next morning from Cincinnati and said, I guess he said he didn't realize what it was going to be like until he actually just saw me standing there, and he changed the plans of his trip and came back earlier. And so last night I met his wife and my 12-year-old brother. I think he was kind of, he didn't know what to make of it at all. I mean, first of all, I'm a 38-year-old woman, and he probably would have a thing to say to me if we just met on the street or something, oh, one of my parents' friends, that kind of thing. But, I noticed him looking at me across the dinner table every once in a while trying to figure out, what is this now?
And of course, people surrounded all of you too. I'm sure that was
Oh, yeah, well, and not that I'm everything else, and since I know a lot of people that are attending this conference, I bring them into we walk through the lobby and everybody sort of, oh, are you Harry, and then I introduced Scott too, that's my brother's name, and he's sitting there going, hi, who are you people? So, any questions about searching or any thoughts about what people...
Are your adoptive parents still alive?
My adopted father died 20 years ago, and my adopted mother is still living. And they knew, she knew I searched. My father always told me he would help me when I got older, but that was moved because he died when I was 19. My adopted mother was not at all supportive of my search. She never said she felt threatened. She just thought that I had no business entering back into these people's lives, or that's what she told me. I'm not at all convinced that that's why she didn't want me to do it, but that's what she said. So, but that did not have anything. That did not affect me one way or the other. It didn't make me feel guilty, and it didn't make me feel like I wanted to not do it. Nor did it push me on that much. It had no effect on me at all. Did you have a question?
I have a question only if there's an adoptee in here that rejected her birth parents and or siblings, or would like, as an adoptee who did not reject, to explain something to me.
I may be able. I know somebody in this situation, so I may be able to.
Okay. I found my daughter on her 23rd birthday. She's going to be 35 in October. Initially, phone contact, fine. I charged plane tickets on a card that didn't have any credit, and I was there within 48 hours. In 48 hours, she hadn't told me she wanted to see me. She wanted nothing to do with me. We played cat and mouse. I was determined after I was in hock for plane tickets that I was probably going to go to jail for them. I couldn't figure it out. And I did manage that briefly. But while I was there, I talked to a lot of people. She had a very troubled childhood. Straight A student, but absolutely no friends, no school activities whatsoever. Adopted brother, basically the same situation with him. Absolutely, totally terrified. Her excuse for having, initially claimed she hadn't even talked to me on the phone, then her excuse for finally admitting that she had, and that she would see me, was she found some school friend that was playing a joke on her. Started telling people all sorts of wild stories, but consistent stories. I mean, over 10, 12 years, it was the same thing. I had gone down there and asked her best friend's parents to help kidnap her and so forth. Okay, you know, my daughter is going to be 35 in October. The adopted brother I talked to for the first time last summer is a couple of years younger. I don't know when his birthday is, but he's a couple of years younger. Both of them. Okay, so they want to deny. Okay, so I've got two questions. One is, they are both terrified, genuinely terrified of the fact that they're going to be kidnapped and murdered by their birth parents. I mean, they believe this. Both of them believe it. And the second thing is, my son, who is extremely shy, well, he graduated from high school with 3 points, so that gives you an idea of the fact that he should be able to figure things out for himself. But it took him until he graduated from high school to figure out for himself that he was going to make an effort on his own to see his sister after all. It wasn't anything he'd done wrong. Started calling her, telephone conversations. I wanted more than anything else in the world to listen to the other end of my daughter, but I didn't want him to have to lie and say, yeah, she's not in his phone. Told him, you come down and see me. Okay, I'll pick you up there for the whole thing. Great, or the bus station, or they went on a bus. 37.5 hours ride to Texas. Got off the bus. Time he told her, I think bus maybe 5 minutes late, called her up. She didn't know what he was talking about. She'd never told him to come. The whole 9 yards. Kid, I told him he'd call me back. He said, what did you do wrong? I said, you didn't do anything wrong. I said, you know, get a nice hotel room, spend the night, go out, have a nice meal, get on the bus, come home in the morning. He said he couldn't do that. And he came straight back. Okay, I really need somebody to tell me why adoptees do this. I can understand, and I can accept. And yes, to the question of the group, was searching worth it? It's still worth it to me.
Well, most people, I've never really heard anybody who's
for
searching
knowing
it,
she's
yeah.
alive and well and so forth. But I've got somewhere, I mean,
Do you think she's very angry at you?
Oh, she's angry, but I don't know what she's angry about. I don't think it's necessarily directed toward me in the sense that she was surrendered as much as she's angry that she was adopted. I do know she tells all her friends that they should get abortions, never ever have the child and put it up for adoption. The pastor of the church told me, I'll deny it if you repeat this, but those people should never have been allowed and would never have been able to adopt through normal channels. I was sent to them with Mother's Home in Kansas City. It was one of those kind of gray area deals.
Well, I was a block married kid adoption, also placed in a dysfunctional family, but I'm not angry at them. I'm not angry at my adopted parents. So I am, but not because of the adoption so much. I'm wondering why the system gave these people
It
two
sounds like
kids.
they're just, you say that they had a really unhappy childhood, or they've been disturbed by the whole thing. It's, I mean, why?
They have to have
why
some
would
place
you
to-
think that they could have a good relationship with you necessarily? I don't mean that in a critical sense, but
No.
if they've been through all this, it's not going to be easy for them to relate to you any more than anybody else.
Okay, but that's my
Especially the
question. I
daughter.
can understand the rejection, period. I don't want to see you on anything to do with you, go away, leave me alone, or whatever, call me again. I could have handled that. It's this, my daughter will talk to anybody and tell any story she feels like. I've had.
Well, it's much safer to talk to them about it than you.
Yeah, but the thing of it is, since she told my son a year ago last Christmas, you know, that he'd come down, and I had up to that point kept track of her, knew where she was at, address, telephone number, and the whole thing. She has moved 3 times, and we traced her down up to a year ago June, a year ago next month. I don't know how many times she's moved since then, but she told the neighbor the last place that we did locate her, that she had moved 3 weeks prior to, that she had to keep moving around now because her brother was going to come to kill her. This was the same brother.
You need to relate to her at this point in your life? I mean, can you kind of back off and let things be for a while? You know, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
I don't understand why she feels that she
while.
has to keep telling all of these same lies. I mean, it's like she's got this record in her head that she's made up out of whole
Well,
cloth.
I think the trauma affects people in lots of different ways, and it seems like, I mean, I think many people are traumatized in their lives growing up, and it's hard to know what her history is, but I think that trauma can affect people in lots of different ways, and it sounds like that's perhaps what happened with her. And so a lot of the things might not make sense, but in terms of her history, or what actually happened in her life, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, lots of different kinds of trauma, it makes sense that people could either withdraw or lie or do a whole lot of different things.
And who knows what, if she asked questions, what the adoptive parents told her. I mean, this kidnapping business sounds like maybe a 9 or 10-year-old, and being an adoptee, you know, you go through these things, oh, my real mother was here, she wouldn't do this.
Right.
But do you think she really believes these, because her lies have been consistent all these years?
Sounds like she does. If you have something pounded in your head long enough as a kid, I mean, how do we all learn manners to say please and thank you and that? Now, what do you say before you get this? You know, that's something that's been pounded into her head. That's what she's going to relate to. And like she said, who knows what she's been through.
But who told her that I come to Texas and that I tried to make arrangements with her best friend's parents? I mean, this isn't
Probably no one
something
told
that-
her that, but
She
it
could
was,
also be fantasizing so much that the fantasy is also now becoming a reality.
yeah.
Then
And
she
that she
doesn't know
can't
the
tell the difference. It sounded, when you first said that she and her brother both feel that their respective birth mothers are coming in to kidnap and kill them, sounds like an adoptive parent has programmed them to believe that.
Yes.
And you
That-
think even in their 30s, they honest to God believe
Sure,
it?
Absolutely.
sure.
Traumatized in that way.
I have racial conditioning that my parents did to me that I've now finally, as 42 years old, realized that every once in a while these phrases come out of my mouth that are very bigoted, and I'm not a bigot, okay? My husband looks at me and just goes, where in the hell did that come from? And I realized my son said, you sound just like Betty, that's my mother. And so it went in there somewhere, but I don't remember some of the times she said it. You get this all the time. And if she is frightened, if you have been always told that you are going to come and kill her, she is so frightened, she's living in this fantasy, fearful existence that she's so frightened she can't deal with it. And your son has now entered her life as your representative.
Plus, I think another thing is she may need to take control of the situation and might not realize that I mean, one of the things about searching as an adoptee is I had no say over what happened when I was adopted. I was an infant. And a great thing about searching is being able to take control of a situation that you had no control over 30 years ago or whatever. Now, she might not have thought about all this, but you're in control here as far, you know.
But I wasn't I had absolutely no control over her surrender.
Oh, no, but of course she doesn't know that.
Yes, she does. She
Not
even acknowledged-
intellectually,
she even
maybe.
No, what they did, okay, my parents sent me from Akron, Ohio to Kansas City, Missouri to the Willows. And what Garnet Hallworth did at the Willows, for those who know all about who she is, what she did was she provided the adoptive parents with the original birth certificates. And both of these kids had their original birth certificates from the time they could read. So.
But that doesn't mean that she understands what you went through at the
Okay, I
time.
wrote her letter, and she acknowledged, but she acknowledged through the ex-mother-in-law that, yes, she did understand what I went through, but bottom line was, we're still coming to kill her.
Sounds like she's got a lot of emotional problems.
So is there anything, any adopt, I don't care if you're adopting or not, but I think if anybody can answer this, it's gotta be an adoptee. Is there anything I can do? I mean, I don't push the subject, since, a year ago last Christmas, he was going down there and coming back, and then last summer, I wanted to find out if the brother was the same way, so I had a conversation with him. Other than that, there's been nothing. I mean, it's like, I'm not pushing it.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, not facetiously, you might want to try a 12-step program for helping you let go, because I don't think that there's anything right now that you can do that's going to get through to her. As you've been talking about this, I've been seeing more and more in my clinical practice, more and more cult kinds of activities. And what you're describing is bordering very closely on the cult mentality. And if her adoptive parents were that concerned and that scared about losing her, they may have fed her all this stuff about what would happen if you ever came back into her life. And she may be believing that. The only thing I think you can do as a parent right now is to begin to let go and let her do it in her own process. Maybe there will be a time when she'll challenge that belief, maybe not.
That's exactly what I was thinking too. I mean, something for you around letting go, because in fact, there's probably nothing that you can do, nothing that you do. Just Just like if you had a kid who was alcoholic or drug addicted or and was continually self-destructive.
Okay, that's fine for me. I started my group a year before I found my daughter, and everybody said, oh my God, what a terrible idiot, and now you're not gonna help anybody else. And I'm probably helping more people because of what happened than if I had a successful reunion, and whatever, I'd say, well, I don't have any more time with this group. But this is fine for you to tell me this, and I understand it. And you're right, I agree with you. But what about my son, who has felt rejected all of his life, who feels like he had a sister out there that somehow got rejected? I mean, he almost must have some of the same feelings, although we won't talk about them, that she has. I think maybe all along he's always known about her, that I was going to give him up too. I don't know.
He could use some counseling with a good adoptive counselor to deal with his situation. He may never get to know her as well. And, if you've got to wait for her to come around, you just got to wait, and in the process, take care of your own self. Look at yourself, deal with what you need. You cannot take care of your son. He has to take care of himself, but you can guide him.
But he's been to counselors who have told him that the situation between, this is because he repeated it to me, not my son, but the therapist said, this problem is not your problem. You shouldn't care one way or the other because this girl is not.
Well, this was not an
That was not an
adoption.
adoption
That was
counselor.
an
You've got
adoption
to find
counselor.
someone that is an adoption specialist
No adoption counselor would
that
take
has
it.
group settings for adoptees or siblings of adoptees or whatever to sit and wrap together like we're doing right here. You don't go to just a therapist. You have to interview the therapist and ask them what they know about adoption. If they don't know nothing, you don't go there.
Okay, can you
Yeah,
find
if
me
that's
one
your
in
issue.
Northeastern Ohio?
No, but I have
I'm
a great
scared.
one in San Diego, California.
No, but,
Yeah.
there's some people here that, at the clinical workshop this afternoon that we're talking to.
Yeah,
trying
there
to-
are people that know,
Working,
yeah.
so, yeah.
You have to ask the right people. I can't give you the answer to that. But in San Diego, when we have problems in our CUP group, or I'm a searcher also, and people have problems, I just say, hey, listen, I've got one in North County, I've got one in San Diego. Go to these people if you need help. And there are a lot of sibling issues that siblings have, and birth mothers have trouble dealing with their kids that they raised. And say, what do I do? Take them down here. 99 out of times they come back and they go, that was the best advice I ever had because I was
That's
dealing
great.
with my own rejection issues. How can I deal with a 12-year-old or whatever child? And they go up and they come back and say, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
does anybody else have any questions about actually searching or wondering what they're gonna find at the end of the search?
One issue that's come up in our group is when the person searches and by all mathematical equations, the person they're looking for should still be alive and they're not.
Yeah.
And that's been real tough because not only as the group leader, but as the person who assisted the person in search, that was real tough. And then of course at the end I say, would you have searched no matter what we found? In light of what we found, would you have searched? And, oh yeah.
Well, knowing it's
No
better.
matter what.
Yeah,
And there have
well,
been visits to grave sites and connecting with the siblings of the birth mother, whatever. And that's, it's been a closure. And that was a real overwhelming experience for me. I went through a cycle, and I believe searches go in cycles. I'll be searching for many people at the same time. We'll find everybody we're looking for is now in Florida. Everybody's in Michigan. I mean, it's real strange. It goes,
Yeah.
and I was going through what I call the death cycle. And I was finding everyone dead, whether it be an adoptee at 19, or a birth mother at 57, or a sibling who should have been 30, whatever. It was real tough. And those expectations I had to deal with, and then in turn, the person's, their lifelong issue was certainly changed.
I was in constant fear. Every year that passed that I hadn't found yet, I just was convinced that these people were dead. And I think one of the hardest things is when you find out someone died, in fact, during the time when you were searching, as you know, and that's...
Happened to my brother's situation. I found his mother literally a month after she died.
Yeah, I think...
Question I kind of wanted to throw out is I was thinking as we were talking about this, when the fears and so forth, and you, the people working in support groups, not from a therapy, but just from a support situation, what do you talk to people about that are somewhat concrete in the way they're dealing with with feelings in general? They're not particularly oriented towards insight, but there is the drive. They are looking. and they're viewing it concretely, but they're not responding to process. They're thinking, you can't get them to think in terms of process.
I get a lot of phone calls, and the first thing the person says is, I just want to see what she looks like.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
But
you know.
people begin to establish this as a pattern of the way they cope with things, and I'm wondering what in a support group do you do with people like that? How do you work with them? How do you? It's an open
Well, when
question.
they,
The process,
Hmm?
desensitize people to process.
Desensitize them, but is
Is
there
that what you're
time?
saying?
Yeah, I think that's what he
In a
said.
sense, yeah. Knowing full well, I mean, I'm thinking of it more just from pure practical support group.
well, in our group is so large, and at the end of, we're getting 60, 70, 80 people now a meeting. At the end, when we go around the room, you know, for the person that you described that's coming, that's starting, is like this, the more they hear people talking,
Okay.
you know,
And the
that,
events, and other people's
Yes.
events begin to
yeah,
linger.
yeah.
Sometimes a
There's a-
phrase clicks in with them, you know, there's just one little thing that they might have heard it 20 times said a different way, but one time it's said to where something, it hits them, it means more to them.
I'm thinking about therapy groups that I lead, but it could be the same thing with the search group, where you develop a set of norms. And when, for instance, if a new person, new client comes into the group, it's not very long before they're beginning to act like other people in the group, and
Yes,
following
yeah.
the group rules. And I think that's one way that people get sensitized to the process issues when they hear other people talking about their process with a search.
I'm finding that what I'm seeing happen is people leave
Yeah.
before that process starts.
But that may be their pace too, Bob. You know, some people, I think it's important for them to know that there's a place where they can go if they want to talk about that, but some people don't, or it isn't their time. And I think we had a debate yesterday about allowing people to have their own pace and
Right.
do a search or engage in their activities in their own way. And that's hard. It's hard to watch people just kind of come in and go blindly at it and then leave. And not
But they do
address
come
it.
back sometimes.
Yeah.
They really do.
Months
I mean,
later.
they came when they were kind of maybe really just looking, you know, looking to buy a house, but they didn't have the money yet, you know? And then they come back, you know, next year after they had saved all their money, you know, so to speak. I know in our group, every once in a while, you know, the treasurer who, you know, collects all donations and all that, will go through and send a note to people that have not been there for 2 or 3 months, particularly if they had just recently joined. You know, we've missed you, and so forth. And that tends to mean a lot. Having a newsletter in your group, even if it's one page with just, hey, we had, you know, 42 people at the meeting and someone brought cookies for a change, and, you know, that was really nice, and we have some new members, and so has had a find. That sometimes is enough to reach out to the person and let them know that that group of people that they met for the first time or the second time is still really there for them. And they keep those letters as kind of like communication from the adoption world.
I notice people like to really read the fine
The
stories,
fines,
the
yeah.
reunion stories in our newsletter. And there are only a couple, you know, so-and-so found birth father, all went well. But they, you know, they'd like,
That's the first thing they open up to.
Yeah.
Well, I'm enough of a believer that the reality of doing things teaches also, but I guess the thing I'm struggling with is people will, I'm thinking of the group that will probably be formed will not be doing one actual active searching. It'll be done in another way. And people will come in, and I'm afraid they're going to, some of the more concrete people that I have dealt with on a one-to-one basis will leave that family of people that are working with the issues and just want to plow ahead and search, which is clearly their option to do. But I'm wondering what, just in terms of your own support. I have never been in large search and support groups. Is the problem. Right?
Come on out.
Well,
yeah,
you know,
I think he was saying,
Go on,
okay,
California.
Come on out.
We were talking in the activist thing at lunchtime about making it part of support groups. You know, you talk a little bit about what's going on in your county, and you talk about your support group, and, you know, this is, we're having a luncheon next week or whatever. And then also have part of your meeting a little bit of activism so that when they come in, they start reading, this is normal. Okay, well, if you start saying in the very beginning and make it a routine thing every month or whenever you're going to meet, you know, and there are issues after search, you know, let them know that. You know, the search process itself is not just a cut and dry looking at a phone book and finding a name. You say the search is like a roller coaster. You have your ups and downs, you come up to your brick walls, and if it's always mentioned, they will then know, well, gee, during the search when it gets depressing, I really need to be back in this group. Okay, I've had my reunion, and gee, the person I found suddenly has not written a letter for 6 weeks. This group is back where I go to share those feelings with. And if they hear it during their whole time that they are with you, then you've done that brainwashing, you've done that conditioning to let them know that that's what the group's for. It's not just to get you started, in your case, maybe find an intermediary, and run off with it and never come back. You let them know that adoption is a lifelong issue. They've never heard about it in many cases that way, and then they keep coming back, and they'll bring in other people that say, gee, I didn't know I was adopted too, blah, 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 but it's, you have to let them hear it or they won't know it.
Are your groups pure search groups, or are they,
No,
are
support.
they, you have a
Search
triad
support.
there?
We have triad
You
there.
have triad? Okay.
Yeah.
My feeling is that the triad, if it can possibly get the triad to continue, is very constructive.
Another thing to do is not just be the sole leader. You know, you don't need to have a board of directors, but you've got to have someone that is in charge of making sure there's someone to greet people at the door. That gives a person responsibility. That makes them part of the group. You have a co-leader because you might get the flu or have to go out of town. So there's someone else that feels important. Someone else types the newsletter. They get so actively involved in the fact that they want to make sure that they're there the next time. Or when they miss a meeting, they call someone and say, what happened? You know? Make them feel involved in some capacity. Some groups serve, you know, tea and cookies, you know. But you've got to have a group of 2 or 3 people making sure that they get a volunteer to bring them or go out to the store and buy them, you know.
Okay, one more quick one. It's sexy.
I'm
How
sorry.
many men have you got? You getting-
In our
Yeah.
group consists of right around 100 people,
Okay.
and I would say we probably have about 15 men, maybe 10 to 15 around in there.
That's about right.
Yeah.
Birth fathers and adoptees.
Yeah, adoptees and birth
We hardly,
fathers.
we get very, very few birth fathers searching. We've had 2 this year.
They're all over in the Capitol building waiting to be found.
Yeah. We're seeing more and more men, either very young or older. Their parents have died. 2 men who have birthdays 2 days apart. They were both 50. They came out and they said, my adopted parents are dead and I've decided it's time. So, you know, we don't see too many men in the middle.
We're getting the young males that are also now birth fathers coming in, or that we had one come in that was going to be a birth father very soon and was working in an open adoption and equal participation in it, but he didn't know what was going on, so he came just to ask for help, and I don't know however it turned out.
Yeah, I'd be interested in having us talk about, if people are interested, about what our expectations were in the process of search, and then how that interfaces with what the reality was, what we found. Because I think for me, I mean, it can never live up to that. Or if it does, if it ever does, then certainly I think there's so much more to grieve if you find what you're looking for. So I don't know.
Well, of course, you go through all that fantasy stuff
No.
when you're a kid.
Right.
And it always sticks, even as an adult. If you're searching, you've not found the fantasy stuff is there. And it changes as you get older. For my personal, I don't know what I was looking for. You know, I never said, I hope these people are this or that, or, you know, I just wanted to find anything, you know. I mean, I think because my search was just so long and so, you know.
What kind of
I
things
didn't
you look-
have information, and then I was searching. I was trying to get information to search with, so, you know,
Yeah,
my
it's
search was
different.
different, you know. Like, you had information and couldn't put it together and all, you know,
Yeah.
fine, but I was, but, like I said, always, I wanted to know what they, you know, what they look like. I wanted to know who I look like, and, you know, that was immediately resolved, and it, you know, that was more than it ever could have. I said, yes, I do look like these people. And then I stopped looking at faces, and I felt like I belonged somewhere. I mean, I never felt like I belonged anywhere with anybody in any situation, or, you know, and I always thought, you know, you were either born or you were adopted, you know. I wasn't born, I was adopted, you know. And I felt that I had been
Yeah.
born, you know,
You actually had a word.
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I was looking for, I would say all the politically correct things to say, which is, you know, I want to find out some medical history, and, you know, I want to do this and do that, and, you know, I want to see somebody who looks like me, I want to feel connected, I want to whatever, but part of me was really looking for a mother, and I feel like that might be like the politically incorrect thing to say, but it was true, and that not feeling like I had sort of good enough parenting for 25 years really left this hole where that should have been, and I knew as I was searching, I think that wasn't going to happen. You know, I knew, like, sort of concretely in the reality, and did a lot of work in therapy around that, but it didn't change.
I was hoping for the opposite. I was hoping I would not find somebody who wanted to be mothering and nurturing, you know, and she's not, so, you know, but I didn't know how I was going to deal with that, since I never got that from my adoptive mother.
Yep.
I was hoping that I wouldn't, because I had seen people find these women that are like, oh honey, you have to come over every night, and and I thought, oh God, well. And that's another thing, you help so many people find, you say, well, I wouldn't want to find that, or, you can be right, and then, but you don't want to tell people
Be
that.
selective on your finding.
Yeah.
I don't know that I handle it right. I've been doing it this way for 13 years, and I haven't had to shoot kids, so I guess what she said when she went to make research, she said all politically correct things to do. She wanted her medical background and so forth. And when the adoptees call me for help, and I'll talk to them, and that's all the further they'll go in the conversation, I tell them, and there are exceptions, I'm not saying I flatly do this 100% of the time, but basically, if I can, within 10, 15 minutes, if I cannot get the adoptee to go beyond what she just said, she started out with what she was expected to say to me, I tell her very as gently as possible, or him, that I don't think he or she is ready to search because he or she doesn't have the right reasons. And would they please
I don't know
call
if I would
back?
say that in the first phone call.
And, well, I mean, you have to understand the tone of voice. I mean, if they're scared.
Mhm.
If I can hear fear in their voice or hesitation or, oh my God, I don't even know this woman, why am I telling her these things? If I hear that, it's a different story. I'm talking about the one that calls up and says, the one that speaks college student, I'm ready now, I've made the decision, I'm going to find my birth family, I don't really care to see her, if you could get a picture it would be nice. Basically what I want to know is there cancer and diabetes in the family, and if there is a sibling. Now, when I get that, that's when I say I don't think you're searching for the right reason.
But that's someone
That
in
might be the
denial.
beginning of the right reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, that might be the beginning, that might be a way of that's a safe thing to say.
Okay,
See, it's real safe to say, I'm looking for that, and that's all.
well, but
Yeah, as a search helper, I don't really feel it's my place or need or a requirement to get people to admit to anything, really.
But I've done this, I've done this, I do it about 4 times a year. I don't want anybody to think I do this once a day. This
Depends
happens
on
about
the
4
member.
times a year. And about 50% of the time, within a week, and I think once it was within 30 seconds, probably the time it took to push the read out button, they called back and said, yes, this is why I really want to search.
Have you ever heard Annette Behrens do her panel on the lies we always told? If not, buy a tape of it and listen to it, because she says, what's the first lie for the birth mother? Well, I'm not pregnant. Or, you can't get pregnant the first time you have sex. Then you get pregnant the first time you have sex, and then you say, well, I couldn't be pregnant, so you go through that. And like, well,
I can't tell my
I can't tell my parents, well, that's another lie. And then you come down to search, and then you say, well, I just want the medical information. Okay, so you get the medical information, and then you say, well, now that I have a little medical information, maybe a picture, okay, and then that, then you get to that end of that lie, and well, maybe a phone call, or maybe a meeting. And what it is we have to protect ourselves, so we put limits. I only want to know if she's alive. Okay, now she's alive, and I've satisfied that need. Now I can move on. These are lies we tell ourselves to protect ourselves.
But do you think, I waited for somebody to pick up on this, they either didn't or whatever, but I think, and I didn't think about it until I sat here and said it in this meeting, but don't you think I'm telling all these adoptees that that's my daughter on the phone, especially if it's a girl, and I'm telling her to stop lying and tell the truth?
You could
I
be.
just don't
I
know,
don't know
that's our
that,
job.
I don't know that they're
Well,
intentionally
no, I mean, I
lying.
don't know whether I'm right or wrong. I'm just saying this is what I do, and this is how it turns out.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not a psychiatrist, so I don't really know if that's why I'm doing it.
The only
but-
question I would ask you
Okay.
is a question about the power that you have to control or to determine whether someone else gets information. And I'm reacting extremely strongly to this because when I was, well, let me tell a short story here. When I contacted the agency from which I was adopted, and they gave me my non-identifying information, and they said, can we help you do any more search? This was 10 years ago in Nebraska, right? But they said they would give me some assistance if I wanted, so I wrote them a letter thinking I would get nothing, or they would get nothing. They made a phone call and contacted my biological grandmother, because it was the last known address for my mother, and my grandmother still lived there. Okay. Before they made that phone call, they called my adoptive father and said, your son is searching. Do you give your permission for him to receive this information? And I was 31 years old.
Oh, God.
And I'm hearing in your position the same thing that I heard then, that somebody else, goddammit, is determining whether or not I can get that information, and I just about lose it. They got a letter from what could have been a multiple personality disorder. I thanked them on one hand, and how goddamn mad I was about their policy on the other.
Yeah.
But please be careful about that, because as an adoptee who having someone else have control over my life has been an issue all my life. I want to have that control. I want to do it at my pace, and I don't want anybody telling me that I can't, or what's an okay reason to search and what's not okay. Please be careful with that.
Yeah, I agree and I accept that, but if you'll notice, I gave him a back door. I told him, feel free to call back when you want to tell me why you really want to.
What, tell me your name again.
Jean Beta.
Gene, okay, thank you. Gene, a lot of times, people, I just got through doing an internship in counseling, okay? And I get a lot of phone calls coming in, and part of they stick us with that part of the job, you know, you learn that way. And people calling up, and we're in the Midtown area of Atlanta, and a lot of people are calling up are you know, we're really in pretty bad shape, some of them. We got a lot of sex abuse, we got a lot of physical abuse, we got a lot of stuff. And people finally got enough courage to call somebody about it. And they're not going to sit there on the telephone and go through an intake form and say, oh yes, one of my issues is sexual abuse, and that's right, and I know that I should get some therapy for this, and I know that it takes about 2 years, and people don't work that way. People only work in what they can handle at the moment. And it's a hurtful thing to you, it's a hurtful thing to them, and they're talking probably to a stranger more behind it, if you needed to be there, that it'll help you talk to them. And not be, because there's been enough judgment in this whole process. You've had enough judgment, you've had some people doing things to children that are giving you a lot of pain. And the same thing is, that's why we're all here, because there has been this sort of secrecy and nonsense and imaginations being very hurtful to us. And that's what we're, I think, trying to do away with. So just if you can accept the idea that possibly there's a lot more to that person's thinking they can't give you, and go ahead and just keep helping them.
Oh, I agree with you completely, but it's like, to me, it's like, it wasn't enough. My daughter slapped me in the face, not physically. She wouldn't dare.
But you cannot put your
here's
issue
another-
onto another
Yeah, but you
adoptee.
see,
You can, that's totally inappropriate.
You have to learn to distance yourself from these people.
yeah, and
I know that, but it depends on which day the adoptee calls.
Okay, did you want to say something?
I'd just like to throw in, I just started a search, okay? It took me 41 years to get the courage to make a phone call to the Department of Social Services to tell me that my records were sealed. And I responded as a 10-year-old child to that response. It's devastating, the first tiny little step I took.
Georgia.
Bob's here from Georgia.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you.
All right.
So I would say, don't underestimate what you hear coming out of their mouths, because it was for me a very fearful step. And as you related, it's been like, well, what am I not identifying? And you get that, and it's like, okay, let's go a little further.
Well, you get the truth out of them when they keep talking, but what do you do with the adoptee that just simply says,
Who cares? I don't care what they say when
It
they
doesn't
talk.
matter. What they're saying and what they're feeling
Yeah.
are two very different things.
Right.
You got two different issues going on.
Plus, they're not lying either. I think
They do want that information.
that makes me a little nervous. They may not,
Spit it out,
It's what they
Ann.
need.
It was really all they want out of their birth mother.
No, that's not all they
What
want.
they do.
Yeah, but you don't know that.
What if it is?
But it's their issue.
And if it is, that's their issue.
Maybe that's
Okay, I'm a birth mother, then I don't want another birth
Okay.
mother hurt by
No, what
somebody
if-
that only wants
wait
to
a minute,
know
Jean.
protect them.
Gene,
We
what if
can't
the
protect
birth
the whole
mother is
world.
just like the adoptee, okay? The adoptee calls up the birth mother and says, here I am, okay? And the adoptee says, all I want is the medical information, okay? And the birth mother says, oh, okay, well, we have this in our family. And she says, and I'm really glad you called because I'd like to know if you turned out okay, and that's all I want to know. The adoptee says, I turned out just great. Oh, thank you very much. Nice of you to call. And they both get that. What if they're genetically that way? You cannot prejudge someone. You cannot. I get adoptees that call up and I have to go through the hour-and-a-half conversation of, do you know that my birth certificate is sealed? I have to put away the fact that I've been working in adoption for 6 years, and I know a lot, and I want to cut to the chase right now because the pot's boiling over on the stove and my husband's going to be in. I don't want to do that, but I have to give them the courtesy of listening,
Yeah, sure.
and then I have to give them the respect that they might, for the first time, be saying this out loud, and they don't know how to say it.
Yeah, but I'm just giving the courtesy and respect to 11 other adoptees and birth parents. It's already
Then maybe you're
followed
doing
that.
too much.
I'm tired.
Jean, as a searcher who does a lot of searches, have you ever thought that maybe you're burned out?
Oh, I get
and
burned out
maybe-
every, I
Okay.
get burned out every
Okay.
second Tuesday of the week.
Okay, then maybe you need to take off every Wednesday and take care of yourself.
It's a good thing that you may be. It's easy. I'm questioning, I'm a beginning psychotherapist, and I'm
You're questioning my sanity.
No, not at
You're
all.
right.
Well, no, that's not the point I want to make. I'm questioning how much I can work in adoption issues.
Because they're too close to
I
home.
there's a couple that's in view in front of me right now, and where adoption was involved. And the guy is saying, and they've come to me for therapy. We're about maybe the 8th session, so we've known each other a little while, about 8 weeks. And all of a sudden, and I know the kid's adopted, and that's their issue, and that's fine. They can bring it up when they choose to. And I'm doing it in the course of things, not in terms of my own agenda, which I think is appropriate. And all of a sudden, it does come up, and out of this guy's mouth comes all of the things that I absolutely couldn't. I came out. I mean, I don't know how I stayed in the chair. I don't want to go into the details too much. I can't. But I just came right out of it. I mean, I don't think I should. I may have.
Yeah, I was gonna
Well,
say.
I tell you what. I mean, I focused real hard on the bottom part of me, which is fairly large, hoping it would stay right where it was, and I think it did. But this part didn't. This part went up like that. And that's what I think what you're doing. I really think that's what you're doing. I think that what you're doing is taking some of the issues you have that are part of you, and you're projecting them onto the person that may call the 5th time for the wrong reason. And you may be right, it may be the wrong reason. I think that guy's wrong too. I know he's wrong. But the real issue is it's his set of issues that I'm attempting to help. And as a helper of a person with those issues, it's his agenda and his time frame and the way he expresses them, and just have to separate yourself from. And if it's getting to a point where it's getting tough to do, pick right. Yeah, I think that's a good point. You really
So
you
I
have
should
to.
say when they first call up and they say, somebody gave me your number and it's a Sunshine Reunion, and I'll say, well, half of me's burnt out, depends, are you an adoptee
No.
or birth?
No.
You step back from all of it.
Take a break.
I mean, how do you feel after you go home after a conference like this? I have to take the next week off.
Oh,
My
yeah,
hair
I
hurts.
did too.
I gotta finish writing a paper on adoption. I'm not gonna want to do it. I
Oh,
can
yes,
tell
you are.
As an adoptee, I think that just making a decision to search is a big decision in itself. And if I have to call someone who I have to trust with everything that I feel,
Who's a total stranger.
and I can't articulate everything that I feel in a simple conversation on the phone, and hear that, then I'll just be sent in a tailspin. I
Okay,
won't be able to
then
deal
can
with
I
it.
ask the adoptees in here to pass the word do one thing? Not just for me, but for other people, because I've heard what I'm saying here, I'm just having the nerve to say it and let
That's
you yell
good.
back
I'm glad
at me,
you are.
because
You're here.
I have my own ideas of how I feel, and I accept what you're saying. But
That's fair.
I've got to tell you that adoptees, there is the searcher out there that I've talked to in the 13 years I started this, that doesn't basically feel the same way I do. And let me ask the adoptees this. I understand what you're saying. Birth mothers are the same way. I mean, but they tend to start out by saying, I'm looking for my child, can you help me? So that automatically lets me know immediately that they're a birth mother, and I can automatically say, yes, I understand, my name is Jean, what is yours? You don't have to give me your last name if you want to talk a while, but I am a birth mother, so I know where you're coming from. But it's like very few of the adoptees start out by saying, I'm an adoptee, and they go, well, my name's so-and-so, and I want help, and so on and so forth, and they don't, why can't they just say to me, or to whoever it is they call?
I really haven't
Are you an
that
adoptee?
experience.
Am I
but-
trying to adopt your birth mother, or?
They might not know themselves as an
All right,
adoptee.
keep
Also,
this in
I don't-
mind.
Why can't we
All
ask
right,
the
here's
person
some,
they
here's
call?
some, here's
Yeah, I don't
just
want to talk about this the rest of the time.
No, I
I
know.
should just
Okay,
say
here's
something
some,
else.
right, just some information maybe to leave on with it. As an adoptee, with a set of parents that were parents, That's all I knew, okay? It's real hard to start really thinking, I've got another set of parents. That's the closet that I'm coming out of, okay? So as I'm coming out of that closet, maybe you can keep that in mind. That's the closet I'm coming out of. Everything in me may be saying, I've got a set of parents. I've got a set of parents. Why am I looking for them? What am I doing? Who am I looking for? God, I feel guilty about that. All I'm really trying to do is just see what these people look like. See, that's safer.
So basically, all you're doing is calling the person that might help you search as just that person out there that's going to do it, not that they're another human being. But
You don't know what you're calling for. Who knows why they're calling? You could be calling for that. You could be calling because there's someone associated with search in some way that you'd heard about.
And you might never know.
And you might never know why the person's calling.
But that's
And they may not know. They just heard about you.
Okay.
It'd
I
be-
don't think
Okay.
it's fair to set
Um,
conditions for helping someone else search.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that's fair at all.
I think that's pretty well
Okay.
agreed.
I think, what, is your name Alan?
I have.
I think what Alan said is that you have to let the search go at the pace of the person that's doing the search, and let it be that, because we are not God.
What amazes me with people is they will contact the searcher. I've had a lot of people contact me, send the expense money, get the search going, we complete the search, call them, say that it's done, send the rest of the fee, we never hear from them again.
Yeah.
What did they bother for? They just want to hear. I had a birth mother once that she contacted me, completed her search, found her daughter, met with the birth mother, and said, okay, here's your daughter's name, here's her address, here's her telephone number. We spent a whole day tracking her daughter down. So we called her 2 weeks later and said, well, how's things going? And she goes, oh, she said, I haven't done anything. I probably never will. I only wanted to know her name.
But that's all she wears
Yeah.
was in
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
then. 10 years from now, be
Okay,
different.
jump in.
Let me make this bold step here and
Yeah,
change the
let's-
subject.
Good.
I want to
Go for
talk
it.
about more what Mary Ellen was saying about fantasy and then finding. And fantasy not just having to do with, oh, these people have blonde hair and blue eyes like I do or whatever, but also fantasy about, when you're looking, when you have your people that you know what your adopted mother does this for a living, your adopted father does that, and you can create the family that you want to find. You can say, oh, I hope my mother's a teacher, and I hope my father's a PE doctor, whatever. And I only had a brother, so I hope there's a sister, and I hope, you do all this, and of course, what you find has nothing to do with any of that, and I think initially you're so happy you found that you forgot what you were thinking you were going to find, and there's all that joy, and then there's,
I think as a birth parent who searched, that my fantasy would be ultimately they invite me for Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah,
And
that's
that is-
another thing,
And that will not be the case in my daughter's, in my relationship, because after 3 years, she still maintains that she doesn't want to tell them. And I could see that after she got married a year ago, that they've had no relationship since with her adopted family. So I saw a real change there. Now she still chooses to do that. But my fantasy was I would find her, she would then call them and say, oh, guess who found me? And she's just wonderful. She has this husband and these 2 kids and a dog. Everything's wonderful. And can she come over and meet you when she comes to meet me? And that was not going to be the case. So that was a fantasy. I had to say, oh my God, that's what I wanted. That wasn't the reality. So that was a real eye-opener for me.
Yeah.
I remember when I got a piece of information from the non-identifying from the agency in Boston, gave me just a 3-page letter with tons of non-identifying information that had real names in it, and places, and all kinds of stuff. And I read it, and it scared me to death. All I did was shut the door. Because it just,
Well, that's
all
another
of a sudden,
thing.
this is real.
Yeah, during the course of
I
your
can't make it
search,
up
it
anymore. I mean, it's
changes
like
when you
I've
find
had a
out
good time
more
making
about
this
these
stuff
people.
up. And I think I know, oops, there it is.
Yeah, when I started out, I had one idea about how these people were and they were going to be, and then I found out that my birth mother wanted to be a teacher. Actually, I use that as an example, but that is not what I thought I'd want to find. But then you get then the fantasy starts closing in more and more, and it changes because you say, oh, well, she was a teacher, and he majored in economics, and he played football, and the closer it gets to, you really find out who these people were and what they did, but you haven't met them yet. It's kind of scary, I think, because your thinking just goes wild. You don't know what to think anymore. You're very confused at that point. Did you want?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question. I just figured out that I was adopted less than a year ago, and
You figured it out?
I figured it out over the years, just
You were never
a
told.
combination of different events and things that I found around the house just stayed with me. My parents thought that I forgot. I'm an only child, and my parents are from a foreign country and much older than me, and they should be my grandparents. But it's a very dysfunctional home. There's a lot of mental abuse and some physical, and I think I might be ready to search. I'm not 100% sure. But I'm wondering if there's any effect on post-reunion relationships and how I might react to the entire situation based on the emotional abuse that I've gotten from my adoptive parents. And will I still feel like attached to them once I, have a relationship with my birth mother, if I do? And will I be able to like stand back and look at everything as a whole and analyze it? Or will I always be loyal to them out of,
My parents were abusive to me too, and of course when I found I was in my later 30s, and when I met my father, I told him all about. He asked me if I was okay, and I said yes. And he wanted to know what my adoptive family was like, and I told him straight out. My birth mother, when she met me, was very grateful to my adoptive parents for having raised me. She thought they were wonderful people, and da-da-da-da. I've never told her anything about what it was like in the family, and I feel very protective of her. I don't want her to know that, because I don't want her to feel guilty, any more guilty than she already does. I'm a lot older than you, so I don't know if I can really answer your question. Somebody else can, but it didn't change any of my feelings towards my adoptive family. But then I haven't had really a relation. I mean, I go there on Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that kind of stuff. It made me feel really glad that in one sense, that I could have some information that they were dead set against me ever getting. But as far as the two people I found are wonderful and loving and kind to me, as opposed to these people who were very cold, it made me think that, I'm kind of real huggy with my friends and, affectionate, and I said, well, I got that from them. And I'm glad that I didn't turn out to be cold and unloving the way my adopted family was. So it put some things in place, but I really don't think I'm addressing the issue you were asking about, but it didn't change any of the feelings I had towards them.
I guess
Most adoptees feel they become closer to their families.
Yeah.
It enhances the relationship. It doesn't suddenly make them the perfect family, but they say, it's better than it was before. There's no more secrets anymore. No more lies
Well,
to be
I feel
touched.
like I have to disrobe myself with my adoptive parents because it's been such emotional baggage that, I don't know if it's a fantasy that I'm creating for myself that my birth mother will just like whisk me away from everything, or if I'm really thinking of it in terms of reality, and then once I meet her, maybe I'll have a better perception of what's really
Yeah, a lot of
happening.
people said to me, who knew me as a child, said to me, you must be looking because your mother was, not so nice. And I said, no, not really.
I think a couple things. One is that we're going to do an open support group this afternoon at 5:30 for adoptees who grew up in abusive families. So
Oh, really?
certainly related to that. And I have a lot of thoughts about that because I grew up in similar situations, and I think that's part of my want or my wish to find parents or family. And that's something, although Marguerite's wonderful and loving and caring, she's also not going to have me move in. If she wanted me to, I wouldn't do it probably anyway, but it would be nice if she asked. But, yeah.
All these
But-
disclaimers.
Right.
Well
But
put.
what I found is that I have, even though I feel like I have some pretty ambivalent relationships with my adoptive parents, I am so incredibly fiercely loyal to them. And this way of
Does
like,
that pain you though?
yeah, but it's so much. It's like intellectually, I can say, we don't have a lot in common. There was abuse, there was this, there's that, but exactly. And I think that just takes, for me, it's taking just a lot of work to try to detach myself or separate myself some. But I also know other stories. I met this woman last year in the bathroom who liked my pants and said, I didn't see her here this year. It was an amazing story. And said, my daughter would love your pants. And we started to talk about this whole conversation. And her daughter she had found her daughter when her daughter was 15 or 16. And her daughter was getting sexually abused in her adoptive family. And the birth mother marched in and said, she's mine. She's coming to live with me. Don't you ever, touch her again. And this kid had a pretty horrendous life. And she was lived with her then for like 3 or 4 years and was just, also in the dark side of adoption, there's more discussions about that. But I think it depends. I think there is that loyalty issue that comes up a lot, but I know other situations where people people have cut off relationships?
I think in my own life as a person, I had to come to the realization that I love my parents. I mean, I'm their biological kid and all that, but I don't necessarily like them. And the last person I ever wanted to grow up to be like was my mother. I mean, I love them because they're my parents, and you know, they're in their 70s and all that stuff. But I mean, I really don't like them. And that's just the way it is. And I had to accept that as being okay.
Yeah, well, I can accept that.
What I saw
Detaching.
with my daughter when I found
Detaching.
her is that she was detaching herself from these emotionally abusive people that she lived with for 21 or 17 years. She moved out when she was 17. And she said, I just had to leave. And then the other day, and I don't intrude on, or I don't ask her to expound on these comments, but the other day we were talking, and she said that she and her husband were thinking about starting a family. And she said, but I told Paul that I didn't want to treat our children like I was treated as a child. And he said to her, are you afraid you'll do that? And she said, I don't know. I let it go, because I'm learning more by not asking. And my heart just goes, what do you mean? But I'm getting the message. But I saw her, when I found her at age 21, that for 4 years she had distanced herself. Then the wedding happened a year ago, and now they do not, she doesn't speak to her adopted parents. They're 5 miles apart. I mean,
What's your name?
Cindy.
Cindy, what was it like for you to learn about, I mean, I would be really interested in hearing from a birth nurse what it was like for you to learn about the kind of family she grew up in.
It's heartbreaking.
Disappointing.
Absolutely heartbreaking.
What did you expect it to be?
To be heartbreaking?
Yeah, from the birth mother's point of view.
No,
I
no,
thought it
no,
was
no,
gonna be
no.
wonderful.
We were told that they were the best of people.
Well, that's what I'm
you
saying,
know.
is
Yeah.
that it would be
It would
disappointing.
be.
Oh, I misunderstood your
Oh,
statement,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, it's very,
heartbreaking.
it makes you angry, because then you're going saying, well, my gosh, you know, she was just put in this round world, and she's the square peg that's got to fit in there, and how well has she survived it?
Your parents know you know that you're adopted?
Well, yeah, after I the last 3 years, I think, or actually a year before I actually said something, it started to really bother me. And eventually, I had a dream one evening that I was studying for a final exam, like, for college, and all of a sudden I looked up and there was a figure that had, like, blonde hair and a teal dress and white shoes, purse, and gloves, and said, hi, honey, I'm your mother. And I freaked out, I woke up, and that was it. And I just put it on the back of my mind. Then finally, I contacted Catholic Charities, and it turns out that she is blonde. And I thought, oh my God, I have to say something. And so I
You must look like your father.
so, and there's a lot that happened.
So they
time
know.
for that, but they denied it at first, and they said, "Who's this whore that tells you these things?" And so what? So what if you are? You know, I mean, what is it that we don't give you?
Yeah,
And
so what if you are?
Yeah.
So what if you-
That's an
So what if
admission,
you
I
are?
think.
What is it that we don't give you? And don't tell anybody about this. In fact, I had to lie. I lied to people at work and said that I was sick, and I lied to my parents when I was on vacation and said that I was at work. And they said, well, if you ever get involved with anything at any of these meetings, don't show up in the paper or on TV because you'll disgrace us, and don't tell anybody about this. But I've been yep, and I think
And you're
it's like
here.
my therapy.
You're here.
So, exactly, and so,
Good for you.
and I just
Yeah.
can't detach myself from that. And
That's
I've been
okay.
told,
In
well,
time.
it's very
In
important.
time.
No, I don't, I'm not sure of that. I think one of the dilemmas for adoptees, I mean, I'm 41 years old, and part of me is still very loyal to my adopted parents. And I think one of the dilemmas is that we belong, after we find birth families and birth parents, we belong in both places and neither. You know,
Exactly.
there is a way that I am of my biological family, but I don't know them. And I am of my adopted family only in the sense of the nurture part. I am not a part of their nature. I look at their family, all the photographs, and I've always thought, it's nice people, but they're not mine. And there's a way that you don't connect, and I don't think that issue is ever gone. I think that's something that's one of the ongoing issues of adoption.
Okay, well, that clarifies it. I was told by somebody at Truth Seekers that I shouldn't search unless I have emotionally detached myself from my parents, either by moving out,
Right.
getting away. And
Well, I
None
think
of us
we've
would
already
agree.
beat this dead horse, but I don't like hearing that kind of advice
Okay,
given to
here's
people.
where I'm having a problem a little bit detached. And I've had experience at 47 with my dad that it's been necessary to distance myself from what I feel has been really over-identification. finally put that in perspective and to realize why I had been doing it. And to that extent, I don't know, I have some feeling that that may be part of the adoption thing.
Well, I think it's harder for adoptees to individuate when you're trying to identify with somebody that's not really,
Right.
we can't identify with it.
It's as if you're doing it, but you know you shouldn't be doing it. It's a fake thing that you're doing, but you keep doing it even harder.
Yeah.
You just keep going after it. And I,
Something there, it's not.
and I hope it isn't forever. I hope I can finally, work through enough of that so I stop doing
I
that.
think it's less,
It lessens, it has to lessen,
but I don't think it's ever gone.
I got a few years left.
Let me know if it ever goes.
Come back to
keep
us,
it
Bob,
down.
and...
I'm only
Give
doing
me
what
my
I
Keep
have
it
to
down.
do. That's me.
No, I'm not saying it is either. I don't know that it is. I just hope it is.
So you're saying that you think the adoption issue will diminish?
No.
I don't think it
No.
ever does.
No.
I mean, as a birth parent, I'll tell you it never will.
No, I'm not
No,
saying
not
that.
no.
And I don't think for an adoptee.
I'm not
as
saying
well.
that either.
Did I understand you correctly to say that you don't really connect with either family?
There's
Birth family and...
there is a way that as an adoptee, I can't connect with my birth mother because I know who she is. I've never lived with her. I know her only in the sense that I share genes with her, but I don't know who she is as a person. I don't know my birth father. I mean, after 10 years, I'm getting to know them a little bit, but I've never lived with them. When I first met them, in the first several years after that time, I didn't know who they were.
Well, my next question probably is going to show my generation as opposed to your generation. But you meet somebody that you like well enough to ask them to marry you, and hopefully, well, possibly you didn't live with them, but you still take the chance of asking to marry you. I mean,
Okay, if you consider a courtship, if you consider it pretty intense for 6 months to a year, then I'm still probably in the first week with my biological father.
okay, that's what I was asking you. In other words, it's still progressing. It's not, you don't feel that you're...
Yeah, I've met my father twice, each time for a period of maybe, a total of 24 hours, but we slept part of that time, so.
Okay. Well, I misunderstood in what you said. I thought you meant that's where you were going to be for the rest of your life, was halfway.
I feel that way about my birth daughter. I've known her for 5 years. Maybe collectively I've been with her 20 hours. I think that's even stretching it. There is no way I really know her. I've always said, I really wish I could get to just know her. I think intuitively I know a lot about her, and I've been to her home, which now she doesn't live there, so now I don't know where she's living. But I saw the furniture, the little things around which kind of give you clues about taste and interests and so forth. But you don't know someone. You don't have that history. When you grow up with your parents, biological or adopted, you see them and they're all together. You see them in their good moods, their bad moods. You see them in the morning, you see them late at night. You have a history. You understand how they'll react when the house burns down. You know that they'll get excited.
If you dent the car.
If you dent the car, you know that you shouldn't come home for a week. But you don't know that with your adoptee or your birth
Well,
parent.
it's one thing
There's
that
nothing
when I
there.
was searching, they said, when you find, you're gonna immediately identify with these people, you're gonna feel right at home with them, you're gonna, obviously, that did not happen at all,
Well, it should have, shouldn't
Well,
it?
that's what I thought.
And I give her more guilt,
The expert said, right?
Some
Yeah.
people
See,
feel
there are
that
no-
way.
that's one of the, what's wrong with you or me,
Yeah.
or because
Yeah.
this didn't happen because somebody said this is what should happen.
That's what
Yeah,
they
but
said
some people
happened for
say
them.
they have this real immediate,
Some
like
do.
some.
Some do.
But if you listen to what they talk about, was they have that need. They might come from a similar emotional composition, so they get together and it's like, running through the crowded airport. They see each other, from one end of the terminal to the other, and they run in slow
that's what
motion.
I wanted.
Yeah, that's what I wanted too. Hugs and
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't
And
get
they
that.
come
either.
together.
Identical.
Right, they come together.
Commercial.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, it's like,
there was
oh, don't even touch.
but I just thought, this woman's gonna come up to me and throw herself on my
Right.
Yeah, but see what happens is
sobbing.
they come together and they hug.
And we were smiling.
But you listen to their words later, is then we went and sat down, wherever they ended up going, and talked for 12 hours straight to get to know one another.
About everything.
And then that's where they say, oh, okay, where do I get my toes from? Did I get these scaly elbows or, whatever, and they do it. But some people can't get down to that nitty gritty where 1 minute they're banging, bodies in the airport to sitting down and talking for 12 hours straight nonstop to catch up for 20 years. Where with my daughter, it was more like, Oh, yes. You know, she was not the immediate one. I wanted to tell her everything, but I sensed from her body language, you know, back off woman. And so I just sat there and listened and let her and her brother lead where it was going to go. When I came out of the whole thing, I found out that we sort our clothes by color and, you know, we do a few little things like that. But that didn't tell me a whole hell of a lot. And so it wasn't her place. She didn't want to know too much, you know. So the next meeting was the same kind of way. And in each time, there's been another stranger introduced into it. My husband, her boyfriend. And so then you've got to go through the history of like this, well, what was it like when you've met each other for the first time? You know, of course, my husband didn't need to ask that, but, you know, you have to go through that, so then you lose half the time you're together by backtracking where you've been. And the other people that, you know, banged into the airport just happen to be real communicative, open, receptive people.
I wonder, and I wonder if sometimes do they have problems later too? I mean, whether this is.
Sometimes there's a real wonderful honeymoon period that's so intense, they talk to each other 29 times a day.
Right.
You know, they write letters, they can't wait to get together, they meet halfway between if the distances are far, and then all of a sudden, about 6 months down the
They
road,
realize they don't know each other.
someone
They're
doesn't
scared.
call,
Yeah.
and it's because the person has had to go back in and say, now that I know them inside and out, or as deep as I'm going to get, I need some time to myself.
Integrate it all.
Right.
Integrate, sure.
And then here they are, and the other person still is over there spinning like a top, and this person over here has stopped and laid on its side, you know. And this person's just devastated, and this person can't put it into words why they have stopped spinning. And so then this person's hurt, and this person's healing. And, you know, it just looks like, then you're not on the same planes anymore. It's amazing.
I mean,
No.
is it perceptive enough?
No.
to
Not when your
understand?
emotions start
It
playing
just
the
happens.
leader.
Because it's
you
a
know.
feeling, it's a,
Too black and white.
Well, have you ever tried to talk anybody out of being in love?
You know, it's a really bad thing they're doing.
Or when you tell someone that your boyfriend just told you, you know, you're really sweet and everything, but I really like Mary down the street.
I want to date her.
You're devastated and you just don't understand. And no matter how much your well-being friend says, you will get over it, you're going, I'm going to die. I'm never going to get over this, because right then your emotions are in control of your
It's not
existence.
possible.
You know, and it does pass.
and if they aren't, there's got to be a problem, because that's what it's all about.
Right.
So was it worth it? I think so.
Sure.
Sure it was.
And
There is
big-
no bad reunion.
And the big lie I told, if I could just know her first name, it'd be enough.
Then she said, well, how about the last name? Yeah.
It was protective at the time.
Mhm.
Sure.
It
Oh,
is.
yeah.
It served its
And then for
purpose.
$3.50 from the court, I got the not ID with her first name. I thought, okay. Oh, maybe I want to know more. Yeah, so I did.
Do people have regrets?
Do what?
Do people have regrets?
For doing what?
Searching.
Well, I was on a talk show last week, and this woman asked me that, sort of out of the blue. I wasn't expecting it. She said, do you have any regrets about your search?
I
And
have
it
one.
hit me, and right, and I said, yeah, I have a big regret that it took me 6 years, that I didn't fight harder, because I found 6 months after my birth father had died. And I really regret that I wasn't feisty or pushed harder or told them to fuck off and grab the file and ran out of the place 5 years before. And I never thought about it like that. The question just sort of went.
I regret that I was not found. I regret that I was a searcher sometimes.
I was very disappointed when I registered with the ISRR and you know, all this kind of stuff, and
It wasn't in there.
you know, they weren't looking for me.
Yeah.
And I asked, were you, and of course they weren't, but, you know.
I don't know that I regretted that so much as I was mad about it, because I was the one that had to do all the work
Right.
to find them. But it was more a, you know, damn it, why did it have to be that way, rather than a regret that I had about my process of the search.
Maybe more
Because it was
disappointment.
empowering. Sorry?
Maybe more disappointment than.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, the odd thing was, I searched for my birth mother for I searched for both my birth parents for 10 years. I just met my father this week. I think it's going to be more of a give and take and a mutual thing, but after 10 years of looking for this woman, we are playing the game totally by her rules. I don't really like what's going on and what the relationship is, but I will do whatever she wants at all costs as to not disrupt or end the relationship.
You know, that's an interesting one. Maybe I can share a little bit of my experience, but I have some regrets about the way that my biological father is dealing with me. After knowing him for 9 years, my 2 half-siblings on that side still don't know my existence. And the only reason...
My birth mother won't tell her 2 kids either.
Okay, after that period of time.
She says she never will.
Really? See, my dad has always been kind of promising that when the time is right, and apparently...
The carrot.
Yeah. Apparently they have had kind of flip-flopping crises for the last 9 years because it's never right
How
for both of
convenient.
them.
It's always a crisis.
Pardon?
Life is full of a crisis.
Well, that's what I told him. Last summer, I wrote him and I said, I'm not going to do anything on this for a year, but I'm going to find them. You have a year to tell them, and after that point sometime, I'll search them out. I think it's better coming from you than from me. He was furious and reacted like I just shot him or something. It was really very threatening. He was very angry, threatened to cut off the relationship. And I don't know if other people dealt with that or...
I have, yeah, not as, it's not ongoing though, because my birth mother said first, I will tell my daughter about you. She was living in Germany at the time. But she also said, finally decided she couldn't tell her husband about me over some 30 years, and so we really do not have an ongoing relationship. We had a little bit for a time. She said that she had done a tape and put it into a safe place, and I'm not sure whether I believe that.
Upon my death?
Yeah.
Open this box.
That's my birth mother, so she's gonna put it
Yeah,
in her will.
I don't believe it, and yet it somehow, I think you're responding in a better way than I am able to, because I can't, for some reason, break that, because I think I told her when I first said, I'm not here to disturb your life, and it came out finally that, yeah, it would, in a sense, I'm happy to respond to you and meet you, and I went to the small town, and we had a weekend together, and we did do some correspondence in general, but it's limited, and there are very firm boundaries on what, and I finally got to the point with that relationship that I couldn't continue it, so it's drifted apart. And I'm struggling what to do, because I think I really would like to have a relationship with my sister, because I think I'm hoping that some emotionality that exists for her does not exist for my sister, and I think it might be freer to have a relationship, and I want that as a contact point. And so I think I've experienced it.
I have a woman in my group who searched out her birth mother, found her a year ago, February. The birth mother was dying of cancer at that time, and the birth mother has twin daughters, I guess about 36 or something years old, and she begged her not to contact her half-sisters. And so she contacted her mother's brother, and he and his wife were fine with this over the last, 15 months or whatever. And he's embraced her into his family, and he says, but those girls, he says, if she says not, that's up to you. Well, the birth mother died in March, and my friend went to the funeral. The birth mother and the adoptee are just identical. And she said she was out with her cousin over at another family grave, and one of their half-sisters walks over and says, hi, do I know you? And her cousin says, oh, this is Sheridan. She's a friend of Sam and Grace's, and she had met Mom, your mom's. Oh, good. I'm glad you could come. I appreciate your coming. So this was March. My friend goes on a retreat in April, a women's retreat. She says, okay, this week I'm not going to be adopted. I want to talk about adoption. I want anything to do with it. She's still grieving over the loss of her mother. And she saw her the night before she died in the hospital. And she said she was driving home from the mountains, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours. She said, I walked into my house, went over and dialed my sister and said, is Kathy there? Her husband says, no, she's not, but she's due in any moment. She's just been down to Los Angeles. And she said, well, maybe, she said, I just couldn't talk. And he said, do you need to talk to me about something? Are you okay? And so she told them who she was. He said, well, as soon as she gets home, I'm going to have her call you. The twins are thrilled to be contacted by their sister. Yes, they remember her at the funeral. Why didn't you call us earlier? Mom was always a little weird. We had all these funny little secrets, but Dad told us that Mom gave up a kid when we were teenagers, but he never told us anymore. And she said, now she regrets. They are now grieving the loss of the time with the sister that they could have had over the last 15 months. But because I kept saying to her, I said, this is your judgment call. Nobody can tell you whether to call your sisters or not. I said, you found all this family and now you can't. But she did, and she said she's now adopted again, I guess.
I contacted my two siblings without the permission without the knowledge of my birth mother, and they were two people in their 30s were furious. So,
Why would they be furious at you? I sort of
Initially they weren't though, right?
well, my sister always was. She said it was the worst news she ever got in her life, and if she was supposed to hear about this, it was to come from Helen, not me.
Helen is your birth.
Right, and she said,
She's
she
been
says,
called
don't
that too,
call my
right?
brother. I said, I'm sorry, you can't make those demands on me. And I called him 2 months later, and he was real happy. He called me back the next night, and he says, Nancy says, we can't have anything to do with you. This man was 32 years old or something.
So what's that like that they know and Helen knows, but neither of them know that the other person knows?
Oh, it's horrible. But
That would
the one thing I said to Nancy before, this was before my birth mother ever contacted me in the year, I had given up on her. Well, not, but I thought this woman's never going to want to see me. I really wanted to see somebody, you know. So I said to Nancy, I said, if I ever meet Helen, do you want me to tell her I talked to you? She said, she will go to her grave never knowing we had this conversation. So I have an out if it ever comes up. But my birth mother said to me, you know, I cannot call her. Neither one of these people live at home. She doesn't want me to call her in case they drop by for God knows what. You know, her husband invited me to the house because I drive by their house all the time. Or a couple times a year when I'm on my way up to visit my other family. She said, no, you can't do that. What if the kids, you know, it's always. I have no
That's
idea.
a lot of people's agendas, isn't it?
Yeah, but I want to meet these two people, and I don't want to wait. This woman is very young; she's 56 and very healthy. I'm not going to say, well, you know, wait till she, you know, 30 years from now. I'm not going to be, you know, so young myself.
How do you think she'd react if you told her that they knew?
I don't know. I have worse problems to deal with now with her. I have to tell her I met my father. And I'm not exactly sure she's going to take this very well. There is nothing that she wants to talk about with me before that happened to either one of us before March of 1989. So that would fit into that category. So I don't know.
You could say you met this really interesting man that looked so much like him at the airport.
Well, I have, you know, I just drop a little picture of him and me on her lap and say, oops, my friend I have.
Recognize him?
Do you recognize him?
I'm dating a new man.
Oh, God. He's really nice. That's great. That is great.
What do you think about it? She might do that. You don't know her.
It's a real good idea.
Write that down.
idea I've ever heard it.
And then come back and say I'm pregnant, you know?
Oedipus revisited, right?
Oh, man.
You can get Helen to sit up.
Find a comedy in these.
This woman has never stirred out of this position or shown any kind of, I think that would get her.
Give her a referral through a therapist at the same time. They'll be able to-
Yeah. Oh, here's another friend of mine's card. Oh, wow.
Does anybody feel a cool feeling when you think of having two families?
I think of myself as having three families since these people aren't married. You know, that's one problem. I have my adopted family, a birth mother's family, and my birth father's family. None of whom live anywhere near me.
Does that give you a good feeling, or does it kind of confuse you?
Creates technical problems. Does it give me a good feeling?
In some idealized way, I mean, I had hoped to have, like, I would do anything to have a picture of both my mothers together with me in the middle, you know, and everybody be happy and love each other, and that's probably not gonna happen either. But yeah, I think it's sort of kind of neat, but I mean, I don't know if they'll ever meet each other.
Oh, I would never want them to meet my mother.
You know,
I wouldn't
people who
want
have big
them to
families, you know, they have cousins all over the country. This is not the same, though. It's
No, I
three
know, you-
distinct families that will never, you know, have
There's
anything
three
to do.
separate entities, units.
But I understand what you're saying. You say,
Yeah, I
oh,
mean, there's
all of a
some
sudden you
kind
go
of
from this
connection.
little tiny family unit to, oh, I have.
There's some kind of connection, although it might not be very, very deep, you know, an emotionally deep kind of talking all the time or feeling, I don't know, I'm not
I get a feeling that when I think about doing that for myself, that I'd be taking a lot of responsibility for something that I don't think I want responsibility for. That, you know, I didn't create this. I don't particularly want to do. I wasn't necessarily. My birth mother and my mother corresponded one letter, and that's fine. And I'm glad they did that. My mother wanted to do it. My adopted mother wanted to do that, and so therefore I wanted to do it. But I didn't have any need for them to do that for myself. And in some ways, I didn't want them to. I don't know why. I somehow wanted to keep it separate. So when you said coolness, at first I thought you maybe meant that.
No, I think I meant that as the opposite of feeling alone and being the only person with no real family. You know, just feeling some sort of connection to people, you know, and different groups of people because of the adoption.
Okay, now you have searched and found, or
No, I
No,
just
she's
you're thinking of
decided-
it.
She's just here being uppity.
Right.
Having fun.
Meow.
But
Where do you live?
I think that's.
3 blocks away.
What's your parents' name?
Please take her mother. Take her away.
Don't you want to be on TV tonight?
Yeah, really. And it's funny, I was in the room where they had the reunion.
How'd you hear about this on, How'd you hear about this conference?
Well, I looked through the Yellow Pages last summer when I decided that I was adopted. And I found Truth Seekers, and I've been going to Truth Seekers on and off. And,
They're a good group.
I'm here.
But I'm surprised that they said that the detachment issue, that they brought up that they
Yeah.
wanted
Well,
you.
yeah, see what happened is they have a monthly meeting and they have weekly meetings too. It's a closed support group. And I was struggling with the idea of searching or not. And I wasn't sure if there's like a certain event that happens that makes you ready for a search. And you know, after talking to everybody, I realized that it's not that at all. It's whether you feel that you're up to it, and realize what you're up against, then you're ready. You know, and so I talked to Barb about being ready, and I thought that the impression that I got was that I should have my own identity of who I am before.
You can't have your own identity of who you are.
Well, I
until
mean,
you
have a better idea of who I am and what I'm about before I become devastated by any disappointments that I might encounter.
Well, it's one thing to talk about, what if I find this or this, or what will be my worst case scenario, or what will happen if I get rejected, or if they're dead, or if they're in jail, or whatever you think is going to be terrible.
See, there's some kind of connection
But-
between my adoptive parents and searching. You know, I have to. For some reason, I feel like I'm being very disloyal to them by doing it. I shouldn't even be here. You know,
Right.
I shouldn't even know about this.
I experienced that.
So I have. in
Oh,
their
well,
eyes,
it
I
makes a
have
little more
no
sense in
right
this
to
context to see why she said that to you. It sounded different,
Yeah.
the way you said it.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's why I'm not sure.
One thing happened to me when I searched and found, almost immediately, is I realized I do have my own personhood, in a way. That, that there is more to be had from this experience that I'm having. But I do have it. I am not. And to me, that was an emancipation of over-identifying with my adoptive parents. That
That's what
just
I'm
the
looking
event,
for.
just simply the event of doing it, has nothing to do with what I found, who I found, or what we will have as a relationship or we won't have. Is that, yeah, I do exist, and it's partly the genetic finding, but I think it's also partly just simply realizing that it isn't going to be perfect either, and I really, in the back of my mind, really wanted it to be, and it isn't, and therefore, whatever it is, but I do have
Yeah.
myself, and that started for me.
Well,
Is-
do you think that emancipation is necessary before you search?
I think it's
I don't
part of
think
the
it's
search.
part
I
of
think
it.
the
I think
search
it's
for the
part of
other
it.
too is
I
like a
think
search
it's
for
part of it.
yourself.
So, in a sense, I've already
I think that's,
already
I
started
think it's
my
part of
search.
it. Sure,
The fact
you're
that you're
searching.
here, it makes it
Search,
easier.
there's the physical search, and then there's the search.
It doesn't mean you're sitting in the library right now,
Yeah.
There's an emotional process, I think, that people go through that's a part of the search process. It's kind of pre any sort of action designed to find parents, but you're doing that part now.
Right.
And you'll continue to do it, I think, all the way along your search, is that the more you find out, I mean, the more you'll discover about you along the
And
way.
if you get to a point that it's somewhat overwhelming, wait a minute, there's more going on here than I'm comfortable with, then it's not. And that's the pacing that people talk about.
I'm afraid of it kind of like running my life alone.
It will.
Only 6 years.
It will. It won't be, yeah, it will.
You become obsessive, compulsive, because for the first time in your life, you're doing something in control of your own life, and you're seeking your identity. And so, but no one else can do it for you. I mean, the searcher can do the work for you if you need a searcher's help.
No, I would
But-
rather do everything myself. I'm just curious about how much time and emotion it really
15
takes.
minutes to
It's
the
a
It's a
10 years.
definite amount of time and a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
Not as soon as
It's
you
chronic
Not-
PMS.
I think we need to be careful, though. I said it will, and that's based on the experience that I've known most people have. But again, I don't want to set it up so that that would be your case.
Right.
This marks the end of session 25.